Slovakia is a member of the NATO military alliance as well as the EU bloc since 2004. But the nation is facing isolation now. As per recent reports, France has expelled Slovakia from a key Ukraine conference. The reason, you may ask? Because Slovakia rejected EU's order to snap their ties with Russia. Now look at this picture. The Slovak foreign minister held a meeting with his Russian counterpart in Turkey in early March. This one meeting has now rattled the likes of France and the Czech Republic like nothing else. France reacted by dropping the invitation to Slovakia for a key ministerial meeting on Ukraine. Representatives from 28 nations were present, but no one from Slovakia was called up to have a voice at the table. So much for democracy, right? And not just that, even Czech Republic announced it was suspending intergovernmental consultations with Slovakia over difference in foreign policy. The French are particularly angry because Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico vehemently opposed sending NATO troops to Ukraine. He declared that he will do anything to prevent the direct participation of Slovak soldiers in the war in Ukraine. Well, these words were enough to ignite a fire under France's posterior, whose leader Emmanuel Macron had said deploying NATO troops to Ukraine should not be ruled out. Like most EU nations, Slovakia used to behave like a French or an American puppet until October last year. In that month, PM Fico won the parliamentary elections. His campaign made two major promises: no more military aid to Ukraine and no more sanctions against Russia. During his campaign, Fico opposed Ukraine's bid to join NATO, saying it would mean the beginning of World War III. And guess what? Slovak voters approved Fico's policy and voted him to power. The 5.5 million people rejected the pro-Ukraine policy of the previous government. When the war in Ukraine started 2 years ago, the previous regime in the country gave half of its MiG fighter jets and dozens of infantry vehicles to Ukraine. It was the first EU country to support Kyiv with an anti-aircraft missile system, the S-300. The Slovak people, however, rejected this approach. A study last year by the Globsec think tank found that only 40% of Slovaks said Russia was primarily responsible for the war in Ukraine. Only 40%. 34% said it was the West which provoked Russia, while 17% said it was primarily the responsibility of Ukraine which oppressed the Russian-speaking part of the population. And now, like a normal democratic leader, PM Fico is going by the people's mandate. He says Slovakia has bigger problems than the Ukraine issue, including energy prices and living costs. PM Fico even said he was willing to help rebuild Ukraine once peace is achieved. And for doing this, for simply following people's mandate, he is being dubbed as a Russian propagandist and a Putin's puppet. Lubika Karvasova, who is a former government official and is certainly backed by the West, said the current sovereign foreign policy of this government is irrelevant and only serves the interests of Russian propaganda. This pulls us into isolation from our closest European partners and allies. For small EU nations, it seems democracy means for the EU, by the EU, and of the EU. Sovereignty and independence are imaginary concepts. They don't exist. This is sheer hypocrisy at the part of those who take pride in calling themselves democratic states. You're watching Outright. Subscribe today for more such videos.